Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 15 waiver wire pickups for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be going in depth into some running backs, wide receivers, as well as tight ends that I believe you guys should be looking to pick up off the waiver wire right now. But before we could get on into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I would also like to ask, if you guys are on Twitter and would like to follow me on there, to please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 15 waiver wire pickups. We begin with the running back position, and my number one running back waiver wire add on the week is Rashad Penny, running back of the Seattle Seahawks, going up against the LA Rams this week in Los Angeles. Rashad Penny appears to be the clear lead running back on the Seattle Seahawks. Now, could some hijinks happen from Pete Carroll where he pulls some bullshit and magically Alex Collins is the lead back? Or magically Adrian Peterson returns and he's the lead back? 100%, because I'm not 100% trustworthy in Pete Carroll. But at the end of the day, where we are sitting right now, it's week number 15. In most leagues, you've got week 15, week 16, and then week number 17 is your championship week. When we are this deep in the season, if you can pick up a running back that has the potential to be a top 12 running back down the stretch of the season, you have to pick him up. Now, I understand that this is far from an ideal matchup up against the LA Rams defense this week. Now, I understand that James Conner did run very well up against them last night in that Monday Night Football game, but Rashad Penny, James Conner, they're definitely a little bit different of running backs, right? Rashad Penny is not James Conner, but I do think Rashad Penny could have a very fantasy relevant day in this matchup. Last week, up against the Houston Texans, he had 16 rushes for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns for Rashad Penny. He also had 1 reception on 1 target for 1 yard. So you got to go ahead, when you pick Rashad Penny up, just take away any negative thoughts on the fact that Pete Carroll is going to potentially fuck him over, and just go ahead and pick Rashad Penny up, because again, this guy really does have the upside to be a top 12 running back down the stretch of your season and could help you win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. Next up, we move to my number 2 and my number 3 running backs. Now, we're going to package them together as a package deal because they're on the exact same team, so we are going to talk them through together. So we got Justin Jackson, running back of the LA Chargers, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, as well as Joshua Kelly, running back of the LA Chargers, also going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I believe that as the week goes on, now this game is going to be on Thursday, so I think maybe later today, Wednesday, and Thursday, we are going to have the crucial information on if Austin Ekeler is going to be good to go in this game. Now, getting hurt on Sunday, having to get taped up on the sideline, not returning to the game, and then having to play on Thursday is going to be a tough task. But you have to also understand the game that they were in. They were beating down on the New York Football Giants, so there was absolutely no reason for Austin Ekeler to return in that game. He already had a solid game, and there's no reason to try to re-aggravate the injury in that matchup. So you go ahead and leave him on the bench. So while the coaching there, they're talking about how Austin Ekeler is quote-unquote fine, I doubt that he's fine, but I think there is still a chance, maybe a small chance, that he does end up suiting up in this game. Again, this is something that I would monitor. I'm recording this video at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Monday. If you're watching this at 5 o'clock, make sure you go ahead and look up some news on Austin Ekeler, because if Austin Ekeler does end up playing, then Justin Jackson, as well as Joshua Kelly, will have virtually no fantasy relevance in this game up against the Chiefs. So, with that said, last week, Justin Jackson up against the Giants had 9 rushes for 35 yards, as well as 1 reception on 1 target for 7 yards. In that exact same game, Joshua Kelly had 10 rushes for 33 yards. In my opinion, I think that if Austin Ekeler is not able to go on Thursday Night Football up against the Kansas City Chiefs, that Justin Jackson would be the running back to have out of the two, because I believe that he is more of the pass-catching back when compared to Joshua Kelly. And in fantasy football, especially in half PPR, full PPR, you are really hunting for those receptions at the running back position. And I believe that Justin Jackson will be the guy seeing that volume instead of Joshua Kelly. Again, please monitor this situation. If you have Austin Ekeler, make sure that you pick up either Justin Jackson or Joshua Kelly. Also of note, since we're in the playoffs, if you have these garbage-ass players on your bench that you don't plan on playing, go ahead and pick up the backup running back for your starting running backs, because then you can go ahead if they get hurt. You don't have to go ahead and be very nervous trying to see, oh shit, do I have the waiver priority? Do I have the money to go ahead and pick up these players off of the waiver wire? Then you don't have to worry. So that is an interesting tidbit of information, a nice fantasy tip that I figured I would give you guys. The next running back to discuss in today's video is Jordan Howard, running back of the Philadelphia Eagles, going up against the Washington football team this week, with Jordan Howard as well as Miles Sanders eyeing a return this week following their bye last week in week number 14. Howard is worth a speculative add, as for some reason, Nick Sirianni just has some type of affection for this guy. I have no idea why Jordan Howard sees as much work as he does, but when he's healthy, it seems like he might be able to even eke out Miles Sanders as the lead back on the team. In week number 11, up against the New Orleans Saints, which was the last time that Jordan Howard ended up playing, he had 10 rushes for 63 yards. Is Jordan Howard some sexy running back ad that you can pick up off the waiver wire and be 100% confident in playing? Of course not, but he is a guy that is worthy of an ad, especially in deeper leagues, because of the fact that Nick Sirianni, for some reason, just loves to give this guy the rock. My final running back before we pivot into the wide receiver ads and then the tight end ads at the end of the video is Jeff Wilson Jr., running back of the San Francisco 49ers, going up against the Atlanta Falcons. With Elijah Mitchell banged up, it is entirely possible that he ends up missing another game. If Elijah Mitchell does end up playing in this game, then obviously you don't really want anything to do with Jeff Wilson, because Elijah Mitchell will be the workhorse running back on this team, and he is the only running back that Kyle Shanahan has actually shown confidence for when they're the lead back to see a majority of the workload. This is a wet dream matchup up against the Atlanta Falcons for Jeff Wilson if he does get the nod to be the starting running back. Week 14 up against the Cincinnati Bengals, 13 rushes for 56 yards. Again, this is a situation that I would monitor very closely, just like with the situation we talked about a little bit earlier with Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson as well as Joshua Kelly. Jeff Wilson is not going to be the workhorse like Elijah Mitchell will be, because the other running backs behind Jeff Wilson will see work. But when you have such a beautiful matchup up against the Atlanta Falcons, you would almost have to start Jeff Wilson if Elijah Mitchell does not end up playing. Next up, we pivot to the wide receiver position, but before we end up doing that, I would like to ask, if you have ended up enjoying thus far, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. So the number one wide receiver add on the week is KJ Osborne, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings, going up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago. This waiver pickup is under the assumption that Adam Thielen is out again with his high ankle sprain. If he does end up returning in this game up against the Chicago Bears, then my confidence in KJ Osborne is very low. While he does have the upside, because we have seen him actually flash and have a solid game with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen healthy, the odds of that happening where he is the number 3 wide receiver instead of the number 2 wide receiver with Adam Thielen out is obviously significantly lower. So if Adam Thielen does end up playing, then KJ Osborne would be basically an irrelevant player in my eyes. But if Adam Thielen does end up missing again, when you have a high ankle sprain, I don't think he's going to be good to go in this game, then KJ Osborne does have the potential to finish as a top 24 wide receiver on the week. Last week up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he had 3 receptions on 9 targets, which doesn't sound the best, but he had 83 yards and a touchdown on those 3 receptions. Kirk Cousins had an alright game. That was a game that the Pittsburgh Steelers were getting absolutely butt-fucked in early on in the game, but as the game kept going on, the Pittsburgh Steelers crawled their way back on into that game. KJ Osborne, though, despite the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to come back in that game, still did play very well, and I think up against the Chicago Bears defense that just got absolutely torched by the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, I think KJ Osborne could easily get it done this week as a top-end option. Speaking of great matchups, the next wide receiver we're going to be discussing is Devontae Parker, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the New York Jumbo Jets at home in Miami. Parker is the clear, locked and loaded number 2 wide receiver option in this Miami Dolphins offense behind Jalen Waddle. This week, I thought maybe, just maybe, since they're coming off the bye, that Will Fuller, Sir Will Fuller the 5th, would finally come back and play. But no, we paid this motherfucker, and I say we because I'm a fan of the Miami Dolphins. Am I a part of the team? No, but I feel like I am. I pay a lot of attention to this team, the Dolphins. We pay this motherfucker like $10 million and he plays 2 games. Crazy. Crazy, but it doesn't seem like he's going to come back, so I feel as though Devontae Parker is going to be the locked and loaded wide receiver 2 option going forward on the season, just not this week up against the New York Jets. It's going to be for the whole season. In his last performance in week number 13, because again, the Dolphins were on bye last week, that game was up against the Giants. He had 5 receptions on 5 targets for 62 yards. Devontae Parker has proven this season that yet again, he is a very solid wide receiver on this team. Now, he's not going to be able to likely surpass Jalen Waddle in terms of targets game in and game out because Tua Tagovailoa and this offense is just designed to feed the fucking rock to Jalen Waddle, but that does not mean that Devontae Parker doesn't have any upside, and if this is a SmackDown WWE beat down here going up against the Jets, then Devontae Parker certainly has the upside to finish as a top 24 wide receiver, just like the guy we talked about just before with KJ Osborne. Next up, we pivot to Russell Gage, wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons, going up against the San Francisco 49ers this week in San Francisco. Last week, up against the Carolina Panthers, Russell Gage had 4 receptions on 6 targets for 64 yards, which wasn't his best game as of recently, but certainly not an awful game. Considering that game as a whole, the Falcons versus the Panthers was a complete and utter shit show. With the volume that Russell Gage has been seeing as of recently, I believe that Russell Gage is a player that needs to be rostered. Plus, he has been far more consistent as of recently when compared to the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, this man had 3 games where he scored 0 points. As of recently, he's been being targeted very heavily by Matt Ryan. Is Calvin Ridley ever going to come back? I have no idea. My assumption right now, where we're sitting, it's week number 15, is that he doesn't end up coming back, and that Russell Gage is the clear number 1 wide receiver on this team going forward. But Nick, did you watch the game last week? Kyle Pitts played pretty good. Kyle Pitts has played pretty good for multiple games in this season. But then that consistency just is not there. He has these good games, then he falls back down into the deep end and ends up playing like shit for a couple games, then shows up again. So I'm not really concerned at all about Kyle Pitts stealing some value from Russell Gage. I'd be more worried about Cordero Patterson. So I think Russell Gage will be just fine. My 4th wide receiver to be picking up off the waiver wire this week is Jamison Crowder, wide receiver of the New York Football Jets, going up against the Miami Dolphins in Miami with Corey Davis and Elijah Moore both on the IR. Jamison Crowder will be the lead wide receiver going forward, even though last week up against the Saints, Braxton Berrios was the number 1 wide receiver, the leading receiver on the team in that game. In week number 14 up against the Saints, we saw that Jamison Crowder had 3 receptions on 6 targets for 19 yards. Now again, is having any player on the Jets sexy? Of course not. It doesn't get you excited to fire up your matchup on Sunday and see that you have a guy that is on the Jets on your team. That is going to make you a little bit disappointed. But at the end of the day, I still think that Jamison Crowder will be able to get it done because he is the lead receiver on the team. This matchup is far from ideal up against the Dolphins. That's why I have him ranked as my 4th waiver wire wide receiver on the week. But I think going forward, when they have a potentially better matchup, that Jamison Crowder should be in your lineup. The final wide receiver to discuss before we pivot our way into the tight end position is Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver of the Detroit Lions, going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I've talked about this extensively on this channel, the wide receiver position in Detroit, because all year long, you have to, dodge these landmines. Because you think that, Amon-Ra St. Brown's the clear receiver, 1. And then you play Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then magically Josh Reynolds is the wide receiver 1, or magically Khalif Raymond is the wide receiver 1, or none of them do anything, and DeAndre Swift has a million catches, or Jamal Williams, or it's a TJ Hawkinson day. This Detroit Lions offense has been so hard to assess all season. But as of the last 2 weeks, we have seen Amon-Ra St. Brown really fill that role as the number 1 wide receiver on the Detroit Lions. In the last 2 games that he has ended up playing, he has had exactly 12 targets in both of those games. Last week up against the Denver Broncos, 8 receptions on 12 targets for 73 yards. And that was a game where the Lions got absolutely eviscerated. They got shit on Odell Beckham Jr. style, and we still did see Amon-Ra St. Brown have a solid game. The week prior, they beat the Minnesota Vikings. Amon-Ra St. Brown has a great game there as well, so I think going forward, we should be able to assume that St. Brown is the number 1 wide receiver, and I hope things don't switch up again like they have all season long for the Detroit Lions wide receiver. Just now, we pivot on to the tight end position. We've got Cole Kmet and Ricky Seals-Jones as my tight ends to be streaming on the week. This week, we'll begin with Cole Kmet, tight end of the Chicago Bears, Packers going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Last week, Cole Kmet had a down game up against the Green Bay Packers in prime time, having just 3 receptions on 5 targets for 17 yards. Though, over the last 3 weeks, he has had 23 targets total. So I think he'll be just fine. Obviously, not the best game up against the Packers, but I think he could bounce back this week up against the Minnesota Vikings. The final tight end to discuss is Big Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end of the Washington football team, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. With Terry McLaurin banged up with a concussion, if he ends up missing, I think it's pretty safe to assume that Ricky Seals-Jones will have a much bigger role inside of this offense. Last week up against the Dallas Cowboys, not the greatest of games, 1 reception on 4 targets for 8 yards, but that Washington football team offense as a whole was a fucking disaster. If the team is able to play a little bit better in this matchup up against the Eagles, I think Ricky Seals-Jones does have a solid amount of red zone equity in this offense, meaning that I think that he is going to be a big red zone target for either Taylor Heinicke or Kyle Allen in this game. Depending on if we end up seeing Taylor Heinicke play in this game or not, I still think Ricky Seals-Jones will be just fine. The tight end streaming options this week aren't the best, but these are the best 2 that I wanted to talk about in today's video. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure to hit that like button as well as hitting that subscribe button down below. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day, and as always, goodbye.